Okay, good morning, online meetup group. Thank you all for coming today. My name is Liz Garcia. I am founder of the MindBodySpiritNetwork.com, and I help alternative health and mind, body, spirit related types of professionals reimagine, up-level, and leverage their online marketing efforts. And I find that most people that are drawn to me are beginners, which is great. We take you to a whole new level without fumbling around in the online marketing and design world. And today is one of my favorite topics, which is about visual design. And we have a special guest presenter today. Her name is Kimmy Mischke. And Kimmy is the owner of Brave & Co. Design. And Kimmy loves creating simple, vibrant designs that tell stories, move audiences, and help build brilliant brands. She specializes in logos and brand identity design for small businesses that are doing good work for people and the planet. Sounds like the crowd here. Over the course of her 13-plus year career, she's developed a clean and colorful design style that utilizes exceptional typography, which is essentially fonts, right, Kimmy? That would be also known as fonts. How do you work with fonts and lettering? And simple modern imagery to communicate client messages clearly and effectively. She's worked with all sorts of clients, from construction firms to cafes, bike shops to nonprofits, so that they stand out in the sea of sameness with brave and honest visual branding. So Kimmy, welcome. Thank you for coming here today. It's all yours, my dear.
Great. Thank you so much, Liz, for having me. I am so excited to be here with you guys today. I love this group. I think the energy is so fun. And I'm so glad I discovered it and met Liz a few weeks ago now, months, whatever it was. So yes, I am a graphic designer. I have been working in graphic design for about 13 years now, and I'm a hugely visual person. I love design and art and just absorbing everything through my eyes. So we are going to talk about visual branding today, and I'm going to go ahead and start my presentation and get right into it. Let me put this on full screen mode. Okay, and thank you guys. So thanks to all of you for being here. It's really nice to have this audience. Okay, so I know that you guys have talked about the importance of personal branding with Liz. So I'm just going to quickly recap that your brand is essentially who you are and how you show up in your business. I like to call it a whole lot of you being you in your business. One of my favorite quotes about branding is from Jeff Bezos. He says that your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. So it's essentially your reputation and what you do and what you stand for and who you are basically at your core. So once you decide exactly what your brand is, you do need to take it another step, however, because people are incredibly visual. You might say you're not terribly visual. I think one of you guys did say that earlier. But the truth is, all people are very visual. We are meant to absorb information through our eyes, even from one time when we're very small. And people generally remember information better when there are visuals along with information. People engage more with images, and people remember businesses better when they have strong, well-designed, and consistent visual branding. They also tend to consider those businesses to be more professional. So your visual brand, which consists of all of the visual and graphic elements that you use to communicate who you are, what you do, and what you stand for, is becoming more and more important as we all move our businesses onto the internet. If you think about it, for instance, when you meet someone for coffee, what do you do before you meet that person for coffee? You look them up online, right? After you meet that person for coffee, what do you generally do? You meet them, you look them up online. what do you do when you're trying to figure out how you can work with someone? You look them up online. And what do you do when you're trying to decide whether you're going to work with one person or another? You look them up online. So the truth of the matter is that we make decisions based off of what we see. And when we look all of these various people up online, if all we see is an outdated visual presence, a visual brand, often we will assume that that person is equally outdated. So it's important that you think about your visual branding and how you're going to present yourself visually to people when they find you online. Okay, so what goes into your visual branding? Your visual brand includes your logo.
Excuse me, Kimmy, 1 second. Were you meaning to share a slideshow right now or not?
Oh my God, I forgot to share.
Okay,
Wait.
that's okay. It's been fine without it, but I just want to make sure you know it's not being
I'm
seen.
so sorry.
That's okay.
Terribly sorry about that, you guys. Okay. There we go. That's better. Let me put it on full screen mode. Okay, and I can still see all of you. So now I have to go back. Okay, so so sorry, you guys. Your visual brand includes your logo. It includes your typography, your color palette, and then additionally, brand graphics. So we're going to start with talking about your logo. So your logo is essentially it's a graphic symbol of some sort, usually simple and distinctive, that is meant to identify your business. There are lots of different types of logos. You can have logo marks, word marks, letter marks, combination marks, or an emblem or a badge. And quickly, just to show you a few examples of each, these are some of the most famous logo marks in the world. Typically, logo marks are most popular with really large brands, right? Because you've got to be super well known to be able to get away with just using a mark like Target. I think that's probably one of the best ones out there. And I'm imagining you guys can all recognize these and know what they represent. Word marks are a typographic treatment of a business name. Sometimes there might be a graphic involved in that name. Sometimes it might be a handwritten, specially created font. It can be any number of things, really. But the idea is that the business name is written out, and that is the mark. You can also have letter marks, which are usually the initials of a business, like BEF, which Liz might recognize as the logo of a friend's nonprofit. And you can have combination marks. Combination marks are probably one of the most popular forms of logos. It's the combination of a mark of some sort and the business name. And I think for small businesses, that's always a great way to go. And lastly, I categorize the last category as emblems or badges, which is where the business name is actually worked into the logo. It's a single graphic that encompasses the business name. I think this communicates a really distinctive look, and it doesn't work for everybody, but it's quite fun and pretty popular these days. So the purpose of your logo, I think often people get a little bit caught up here. One of the main purposes of your logo is to identify your business. You want to have a logo help people remember your business. You want to differentiate your business. But one thing that I think sometimes people think their logo needs to do, which it really truly does not have to do, is it doesn't have to describe your business. Your logo doesn't actually have to say what you do. Think back to all those logo marks that I showed on that one slide. Think about Target, for instance. It says absolutely nothing about what Target does. It gains its meaning simply from its association with the business. And so it's really something you want to think about if and when you ever have a logo developed for your business. You want to think more about it evoking certain emotions and feelings about your business as opposed to telling people exactly what you do. The best logos are simple, They're very clean. One of the main reasons logos need to be simple is because they've got to be used often at very small sizes. And if your logo is quite complicated and you shrink it down, it becomes unreadable. You want your logo to be timeless. You want it to take you down the long haul, right? If you plan to be doing your business for a decade or more, ideally you don't want to have to change your logo during that time. Maybe make small tweaks. So you want to avoid trends. Right now, I think a really big trend, or I think it's dissipating a little bit, but for many years it seemed like everybody was using watercolor and handwriting in their logos, which, as much as I loved it and it was beautiful, it was simply too trendy and it was all over the place. So if you're trying to differentiate your business and you're sticking with a trend that everybody else is using, it's not going to work. You want your logo to be versatile. If you think about all the different ways we promote ourselves these days, your logo needs to work in so many different settings: on your website, in social media posts, on your business card if you're still using one. If you're a retail store, you need to be able to use it on a sign. So one of the things that I always do when I design logos for clients is that I will give them a horizontal lockup of their logo. I will give them a vertical lockup of their logo. I might give them a submark that they can use as a substitute for their logo in certain instances. The idea is that you can use your logo in lots and lots of different ways. You want your logo to be appropriate. And basically this means that if you have a law firm, you don't want to use a logo that's got super bright colors and playful imagery in it. If you are a massage therapist, you don't want to have a logo that's extremely uptight and corporate feeling. So you want your logo to be appropriate to what your business is and to fit with what you're actually trying to communicate. And lastly, you want your logo to be memorable. And this goes back to being simple and timeless. If your logo is distinctive, if it's simple, if it makes an impact quickly, it's going to help people remember your business and you more easily. So how do you get a high quality, effective logo? It's not as hard as you might think. I personally strongly recommend that people hire designers. I know you can do so many things yourself online these days in the design world, and I think it's wonderful that people can do their own work. I think logos can be quite difficult, and I recommend that people hire someone to do their logos. You don't have to spend thousands upon thousands of dollars. When you're looking for a designer, you want to make sure that the designer you hire has a strong portfolio with work that you think is appropriate to what you're looking for in a logo. And you want to make sure that the designer has a solid process, that it's clear that they have walked people through this process many times before and it makes sense. And that they will help guide you through the process, because of course so many of us as solopreneurs especially have never worked with a graphic designer before, have never, had anything designed for many, many people. And so you really want your designer to have a good process that's going to make sense to you. One of the things that you need to be able to do, there's some responsibility on you, of course, in getting a high quality, effective logo. You've got to be able to communicate your brand very clearly to whoever the designer is that you are working with. Most designers will give you some sort of a brand questionnaire to fill out that will help walk you through communicating that information. But it's a really, really great idea for you to have a super solid understanding of who you are, what you stand for, before you even begin the process. One thing I think when you are working on getting a logo, you want to really keep your target market in mind. I think sometimes people get caught up in focusing too much on what they like and what appeals to them when they are working on their visual branding. And while certainly I think as solopreneurs, there's overlap there in terms of what you like, because often we are, to some degree, our own target markets, you do really want to think beyond yourself when you're designing, when you're having a logo designed, and think about what's going to appeal to your target market and the people that you are trying to attract to your business. And then lastly, and I think this one can be difficult for people, you want to, as you're going through the design process with your designer, you need to be able to give him or her very clear, detailed, constructive, and thorough feedback. When you, for instance, maybe see first rough drafts of what your logo might look like, it's really important to be able to communicate to your designer, not just that you like whatever they've shown you, but why you like whatever they've shown you. Oops, and I'm not even supposed to say why you like. See, it's easy to slip into that. You need to be able to tell your designer why you think certain aspects of the logo rough concepts are working, why they might be working, why things aren't working, what you'd like to see differently, etc. And so as long as I think that you hire someone who's open to criticism and who's honest and straightforward and sees the process as a collaboration, you'll be great and things will go fabulously. Which takes me to the next aspect of your visual branding, something that I absolutely love. I love typography. Fonts, I think, are like people. They have personalities and quirks and funny, personality traits, just like we do. And typography, with your branding especially, it actually is not just the fonts, but it's also how you treat your copy. There's so much that you can do that will communicate so many little messages within your typography. So quickly, there are a number of different font types, and other people might categorize these slightly differently than I do. But I typically break fonts up into serif fonts, sans serif fonts, script, and decorative fonts. And these categories have different personalities, and then within each category, every little font has its own little quirks and personality types. So serif fonts, I think, can be beautiful, and they can be very elegant and sophisticated. To me, I find serif fonts have a slightly more traditional feel to me than, say, sans serif fonts. They can be more formal. They work really well for businesses like banks, lawyers, doctors, but they can also be used. There are certain sans serif fonts that just might have a quirky little, I don't know, quirky little aspect to them that can make them super appropriate for something completely different, like a massage therapist again. It's not to say just because serif fonts tend to be a little bit more traditional doesn't mean you can't find a fabulous serif font that you can adapt and use for something less traditional. Sans serif fonts, my personal favorites, because they are nice and clean. They tend to be a little bit more casual also, but they can also be really industrial if you find a really nice solid, as on the bottom down here, the solid geometric font. So they can work for lots and lots of different types of businesses. Script fonts are very, very, very popular these days, and they're very fun. They can say so incredibly much. If you look at all of the different choices that I've got there, those are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different fonts. They're all either handwriting or script, but if you just look at them, they say incredibly different things, right? So they can be incredibly fun. I do think you need to take care these days if you're using a script or handwriting font, because they can be so trendy. Decorative fonts come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes, and you could probably find a decorative font in this day and age that says just about anything that you want it to say. While fun, decorative fonts need to be reserved for headlines and logos and very, very small bits of text, because they can also be unreadable. Well, not unreadable, but difficult to read. You don't want to use, this one, the one that says fun, it's got all these lines in it. So obviously you can't use that for body copy because it'll be too difficult to read. So those are fonts, and certainly they're a huge part of your typography. But there are other aspects of typography that can say so much about your business. Text alignment is really important. Flush left or left aligned copy is the most common way that we see text aligned. It's easy to read. It's pretty standard, but it's not overly traditional. It's not overly edgy. It's a great default. You are almost always safe using flush left text. Centered text, I have to admit I have a small issue with. It's often a default for novice designers, and it gets a little bit overused. So I think it can make your materials look a bit amateurish if it's overused. I tend to limit centered text to headlines and subheadlines, quotes, smaller quotes. It's great for, generally, you don't want to use centered copy for large bodies of copy because it's difficult to read. Forced justified text basically means that you've forced your lines of text to go all the way across your line on every single line. And I have to admit, because I'm kind of a structure person and I like things to be very nice and neat and lined up, I secretly love forced justified text. The problem is, it doesn't always work. And this block of copy that I've created on this slide is probably not the best because it doesn't show you exactly what can happen. But what can happen is that you will get funny rivers in your lines of copy. So for instance, one line of copy might spread the letters out really far. And then whereas your next line of copy might kind of have to squish them all together to fit it in with forced justified text. So just know you have to be careful. And you might have to go in and do some manual letter spacing. Flush right, I have to admit, is one of my favorites because I kind of like sort of the more modern and slightly edgy look to design. But again, unfortunately, it doesn't work for large bodies of text. It works great for quotes. It works great for call outs and maybe just, a social media post that's got a couple of lines of text. It's wonderful for that. I think it communicates a little bit of a quirkier, edgier message, but you have to be careful, again, with it. Sentence case is another, I think, really great way to communicate something specific about your business. Title case, especially in headlines, is when you capitalize the first letter of each word. Pretty standard, lots of people use it. It works really well, I think. A lowercase, I think, can be quite fun, especially for headlines. Just getting away from this whole idea that the first letter of every word has to be capitalized. I think it says something a little bit more playful about you, a little bit more about rule breaking, possibly. I have seen people use all lowercase in larger bodies of copy. I personally don't recommend it. I completely understand what they're trying to say when they do that. But again, I think it makes your copy a bit difficult to read. And one of the single most important issues when it comes to any copy, any layout of text is readability. If it's not readable, your message is lost. People can't read your text easily. So no matter what you're trying to say, you're not exactly getting the message across that well. So while all lowercase I think is fun for headlines, quotes, things like that, I don't think it works for large bodies of copy. All caps is also fun for headlines and quotes and things like that. I think it gives a bit of a more authoritative feel. I think it draws people's eye a little bit more clearly and says, like, this is important, look at me. Again, you don't want to use it for large bodies of copy because it's difficult to read. Any questions so far? No?
I don't see any, Kimmy, but I'm taking notes that I want to come back to some of this stuff.
Okay.
I want to kind of reiterate what you're saying here.
Okay, great.
But so far, this is great. And I think people don't realize the extent to which graphic designers have awareness of who's looking at it, Mm-hmm. When you're a beginner, you don't think about anyone else. You think about you and what you like. But
exactly. That's such a good point. And what's involved in it too. I think often people think when they think graphic design, they think, beautiful imagery and whatnot. But, the books that you read with the paragraphs of text, that's graphic design.
Yeah.
And it's so important because it's so key to communicating a message well. Yeah. and typography in particular it's kind of the unsung hero of graphic design.
I love typography.
Yeah, me too.
All right, let me see. Let me check the chat real quick.
Okay.
Lynn Schussel says awesome info. I agree. And Deborah has a question.
Sure.
She mentioned that a logo is used for business cards if you're still using them. Is there an alternative to business cards that is preferable right now?
You know, no, I still believe in business cards, especially if you're doing in-person networking. If you're not doing in-person networking, I don't know that you need them. I mean, I have to admit, I've got a couple of boxes of business cards and I have not used that many of them. I think it really just depends on where you're focusing your attentions. If you're doing most of your marketing online, you might not need a business card, even though I love business cards so much. It's sort of hard to tell people that. So not that there's an alternative, although, you know, your website to some degree is a business, you know, can take the place of a business card.
I agree, though. I mean, if you have a beautifully designed logo, you're going to want a business card regardless. For me, I'm like, it's a piece of art. I love it. I want to, and for Deborah, who's doing a lot of workshops and stuff, I think, you know,
Absolutely.
if you're doing stuff and you need business cards.
Yeah, you do. If you're talking to people in person, you need business cards. There's not an alternative.
Yeah. And I feel like when I receive one that's really beautifully designed, it makes an impression. It's like, like you don't want to throw it away.
Right. And that's where there's a whole nother side to visual branding when you talk about things like paper weight and
no kidding.
You know, and print quality and finishing and all. That's a whole nother side.
Yeah, there's a whole lot way more to graphic design than most people realize. Okay, I'm going to make one more comment here, then you can continue, Kimmy. But Lynn just had she created a daily journal type of thing, or it's a workbook, right? It's a daily scheduling calendar. And I myself do a lot of graphic design, but that's a whole other ballgame to design something. It's so simple, but I would hire someone to do it because I don't have that skill and the experience to really get the spacing correctly, the font, the whole thing. It's a big process. So anyway, all right.
Yeah, I've never designed one, but I think it would be incredible to do something like that.
Yeah, it's a lot of good simple design. I look at magazines, how they're designed. Some of them are just beautifully done, and I wouldn't ever have come up with that on my own.
I think that's one of the things about design, though, is the most beautiful design and some of the best graphic design. You don't even really see it as design necessarily, right?
Right.
It just works.
Yeah. Okay. Back to you.
All right. So typography. It's clear it's an incredible way to reinforce and communicate your brand. If you are doing this yourself, if you're picking your own typography, there are just a few key tips that I would recommend to go about that. For one, I think you want to pick a couple of different fonts, not more than that. If you've got to, pick a third for special occasions. I say go ahead, but one of the biggest problems I think people make sometimes when they're doing their own graphic design is to pick too many fonts, and it can communicate a very confusing message to do so. You want to make sure that you pick high quality, very readable fonts. Again, if people can't read your typography, your message is lost. You want to assign roles to the different fonts that you select. Let's say you pick two fonts. So for instance, here I've picked Acumen Pro Condensed and Museo Sans. And I've assigned to my headers, I'm using Acumen Pro Condensed in all lowercase in dark brown at 27 point for all my headers. For subheaders, I'm using a teal color. I'm using all caps. And then for my body copy, I'm going to use Museo Sans 300 in sentence case in the dark brown. Your type sizes might change because it's going to depend on whatever piece you're designing. So these are just guidelines. that I've included here, but you want to create something like this for yourself so that you know that whenever you go in and create a new piece, you're going to use headers, you're going to use Acumen Pro Condensed and all lowercase for your headers, etc., etc. And then, of course, as always, you want to be as consistent as possible. That's one of the best ways to reinforce your brand and build your visual brand and have people recognize who you are. Okay, so that wraps up typography and brings us to color, another one of my favorite areas. When you're creating a color palette for your business, again, you're trying to communicate something about your business and yourself, if you're a solopreneur, and what you stand for. Color is another incredible way to do that. For color palettes for businesses, I tend to keep it at 6 colors or fewer. That's not a hard and fast rule, but I think that gives you a lot of flexibility without sort of diluting your graphics. Color is incredibly important. Again, going back to people being so visual. Adding color to your brand will help increase your brand recognition by 80%. There have been a lot of studies lately about, what makes people remember brands, what makes imagery stick with people, and color is a very big piece of that. It influences people's decisions of whether to stay on or leave your website. And one of the most amazing things about color is that every single color on the color wheel communicates a very specific message. We as humans have assigned meanings to colors. And so it's a great tool that we have when we are creating our visual branding for our businesses. One of the things that you need to keep in mind, however, especially if you have an international audience, is that different cultures interpret different colors differently. White means one thing here, it might mean something else in a different culture. So you just need to be cognizant of that. Along with the fact that these are general ideas and general meanings that we have. Again, people's individual experiences may cause them to interpret colors to mean something different than sort of these general guidelines. So just to go over a few, and give you a sense of kind of how fun this can be, I've put on the right-hand side of the colors some of the more positive meanings, and then you also need to know, however, that every color might also have some negative connotations. So yellow, while it communicates joy and warmth and a sense of play, can also be interpreted to mean caution and cowardice. Blue is wonderful for communicating confidence and authority and a sense of calm and serenity. But if you use too much blue, it can say you're aloof and overly cool. Green communicates growth and nature and healing and serenity. But also, if you think about, have you ever heard someone describe someone as, oh, he was very green? Well, it can also communicate inexperience. Orange is fun and warm and affordable, but if you use the wrong orange or too much orange, it can say something is cheap. Purple, one of my personal favorites, has long been associated with royalty, creativity, mystery. It can also say something is overly extravagant. Red says energy, action, passion, but it can also cause people to feel fearful and feel like they're in a dangerous situation. Pink, long associated with girls and innocence and nurturing and gratitude. And this isn't a negative, what I put on the left over here. I just wanted to point out that if you use a really bright pink, for instance, it's very different than using a soft pastel pink. A bright pink paired with a black, for instance, can be very bold and modern. And then brown, another one of my favorites, and that looks like black on my screen, so forgive me, says so much about the earth and being grounded and subtle, and brown makes me think of digging my hands in rich earth. But it could also say that something is overly rough and simplistic. So if you were working on creating your own color palette, we again have to go all the way back to knowing your brand personality and knowing what you're trying to communicate about your brand. Who are you as a solopreneur? What is your business trying to put out into the world? What do you want people to know about you and think about you when they see your visual brand? I will usually start by finding visual inspiration. One of the best places to go, of course, is Pinterest. But also I think another great thing to do is just to look at stock photography sites and find photos that just kind of communicate the feel that you're trying to communicate about your business. When you gather all of this inspiration, you want to try and bring it together if you can. And just look through all the images that you've selected that speak to you in some way or another, and try and find colors that show up over and over again, and pull up to 6 colors that you just keep repeating throughout those images, and then look at them. Of course, before you move on, you need to go back to your brand personality. You need to look at those colors and think about whether they're actually communicating what you want them to communicate. And then pick your 2 favorites. This is my color palette, actually, and I started by picking this kind of light, snowy Colorado. Actually, it's not snowy, but that blue color came from the winter Colorado sky, which I love so much. I'm a winter person, and that spoke to me immediately. And then this sort of warmer corally red to balance out the coolness of that blue. I then went on to pick a 3rd color, which is this sort of aubergine purplish color, partially just because purple is one of my favorite colors. And then again, I balanced it with a more sunny yellow. One thing you want to make sure you have in your color palette is both a dark neutral and a light neutral. And that's super important so that you can have contrast. You know, this lighter color in the lower left-hand corner will stand out on both the red, the purple, and the brown. So I can reverse out copy if I want to. And then the dark brown shows up really well on the blue and the yellow. So you want to make sure you've got that contrast for your typesetting and for your headlines, and so that you can put the different colors on the other colors.
Kimmy, I need to interrupt. We have 3 minutes left, and I didn't want to interrupt you because I'm enjoying this too much, but I just wanted to let you know some people are going to have to go here in a few minutes. Okay. And everyone, if anyone has to go, you're welcome to. I'd like to let Kimmy finish her presentation because it's good stuff.
Okay, I'm so sorry I'm going over. I tried to keep it short, but that...
No, but I wanted to point out you're wearing your colors today.
What do you know?
Perfect. I know.
Totally subconscious.
You know your brand.
So try those colors out before you actually write them down in stone. And this is a tricky one, and honestly, I'm not 100% sure how people do this without, actually, you probably can do this in Canva, I think, is to get the hex colors for your colors before you write them down in stone. And the hex colors are what you want to have written down so that you know you can use your selected colors across a lot of different platforms. And I'm happy to give more information about that. If anybody is doing this themselves and is like, I don't know what a hex color is, can you please help me figure that out and where I get it? I'm more than happy to help anyone who needs it. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to talk about is brand graphics. Often people think that they just need a logo, right? But if you think about how many different things we do with our visual brands for our businesses now, you really need more than just a logo. You know, there was a time when businesses could just have a logo designed and you put your logo on a white piece of stationery and you were good. But unfortunately, with the proliferation of online business, you really do need way more than that in this day and age. Using brand graphics, first of all, there's so many different things that you can use for brand graphics. Patterns, icons, photography, and I actually go on to list more in the next couple of slides. But one of the things you want to do is just pick a couple. As with most graphic design, less is more. You want to use your brand graphics consistently, and you want to make sure that they fit with your brand personality. Some of my personal favorites are patterns. I started my design career with a stationery company where I mostly just designed patterns for gift wrap and things like that. So I love using patterns. One of the things you can do is have one pattern and use it in different colorways. You could also get a number of different patterns that have a very similar feel and use them all in the same color combination. Icons are another favorite. They work great on your websites. For your blog categories, for instance, you can use things like the tools that you use regularly in your business, any kind of meaningful items. If you're a yoga instructor, for instance, there's all sorts of imagery you can use for icons. You just want to make sure that you use them all in the same style. And this is the style that I use often for my icons, which is this sort of offset outline, which I also use throughout my branding with shapes. Blocks of color and geometric shapes are another type of brand graphic that I love using. This is for a business coach that I did a couple of years ago, where I use primarily blocks of color and geometric shapes. And then photography, of course, is one of the most popular ways to add to your logo and your typography and your colors. When you're using photography, you want to, there are a couple of ways that you could do it. You could find photos that mirror your color palette. You could pick a style of photo. So for instance, I wanted to show you with these photos, the style is that there's some sort of organic material. It's close up in the foreground, and then the background of the photo is sort of blurred out. And again, there's a common subject matter through all of this as well. Some other different styles might be, you know, there's landscapes, there's black and whites. You could use super minimal photos where there's just one focal point in the photo. There's lots of different kinds of styles that you could use. And again, you just want to be consistent. In addition to the style of photography, you also want to make sure that you treat the photos the same way when you use them. So for instance, if these were Instagram posts, you know, what I've done here is I've used a very similar style of photo, and I've reversed out copy in white in each one in the same place. And so that just creates that visual consistency that helps to make your brand that much more visible. You could also use textured backgrounds, borders, illustrations, organic shapes. It's really, honestly, the possibilities are absolutely endless. And whatever you decide to do, just be very consistent with it. So there you go. That's visual branding. That's a number of ways that you can help to build your visual brand to reinforce your personal brand that you guys have been working on, I think, with Liz. If you want any more information, I have actually written blog posts that go into more depth about each one of these topics. And you can take a look at any of those blog posts if you want information. Also, my my Instagram feed. I've done lots of short little educational series throughout my Instagram feed that covers a lot of information about typography and color as well. So that's it.
Thank you.
Anyone have any questions? You're welcome.
We did have let me just expand the window. We did have a couple of questions. A couple people did have to leave.
I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay, good. Now we can see you. So Deborah had a question about what are the attributes of a high quality font?
Oh, okay. Attributes of a high quality font. Well, one attribute I would say is that there are lots of different weights. That makes for a really versatile font. So for instance, and especially I know if you're doing these things yourselves, it's going to be a little bit more limited. When you go out and buy a font, it may have everything from, you know, extra light, which is the lines are going to be quite thin, to black, which means it's going to be really, really bold and heavy. If you're doing this yourself, and you're using Canva, for instance, when you scroll through the fonts, you want to look and see if there are different weights available. That will give you flexibility. High quality font, it gets pretty detailed and technical. I would say just make sure that it's readable. Spacing between letters, and this can get kind of really, really technical, but you want to make sure that the spacing between letters is standardized. So for instance, a font that might have, let's say you type an A and a B next to each other. Let's say you type the word abstract. And you look at it and you're like, oh my God, there's a ton of space between the A and the B, but then the S is kind of squished up against the A, B, S, the B on the other side. That's not a high quality font. That's probably one of the easiest ways to tell whether it's a good font or not.
That's a good point. Good question, yeah. And if you go to myfont.com, which is a great font website, do you use that, Kimmy?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's myfont.com. You can see tons of fonts, and it's like if you're a graphic designer, you don't know what to choose because there's so many awesome ones. But you'll see what Kimmy's talking about, and I've come across that in some fonts where the kerning, which is the space between the letters, needs to be fine-tuned, which a graphic designer does as part of the trade, but you as a novice wouldn't know any better, and it's like, this doesn't look right.
Yeah.
It looks kind of crappy.
Yep.
So,
or if overall the letters are too squished together, that's problematic as well.
Yeah. Yep. And Kimmy was mentioning Canva, which is an online graphic design kind of place for novices to manage how you build visual content for yourself. So it's canva.com, just so you guys know. I know some of you are using that. Some of you use picmonkey.com. But, I've been doing graphic and web design for decades. And I would hire someone to do logo design. That's a whole other ball of wax. Logo design is a whole other ball of wax. Visual branding is a whole other ball of wax, especially when you get detailed into the font selection, because everyone, most amateurs want every font under the sun. It looks like a clown show. They want every color under the sun. It looks like a clown show, and you can see it. And I used to be a clown show because I was a novice for many years. And there's a tendency to just have to do all of it, and it's not a good idea. And I love, during a really professional brand, visual branding, they're going to give you a visual kind of branding brief, or what do you call that document that you would give somebody that really your clients should be handing to graphic designers. You should have it done, right? And then your graphic design is going to help you decide what are the fonts that will communicate this, what are the colors, what are the size of the font. Like everything that Kimmy said today is what a true visual branding is about, so that now when you leave, if you're not working with the graphic designer, you have the documents that are going to stick to your brand. You're not going to create anything without using your hex colors, right? You're not going to go wander off and choose another color. You're going to choose one of your main colors, and you're going to have the number, which is called the hex number, so you know that you got to use it again consistently so that you're not, again, a clown show. But there's a lot involved.
One of the things you can do, I did this for someone recently. I created her visual brand for her. And then what I did is I went into Canva and I selected the font, pulled out the fonts. You can actually create a style guide within Canva. So her fonts were were highlighted, which fonts that she should use and how she should use them, what she should use them for. You can put your hex colors in there. I created social media post backgrounds for her and was able to upload them into Canva for her. So when she created her own Instagram posts on her own, she could just typeset on top of those backgrounds. So I haven't worked very much. What was the other one that you mentioned?
PicMonkey.
PicMonkey. I haven't worked with PicMonkey, but I think Canva facilitates that process really, really well of handing off the style guidelines.
Yes. So that's a great point. To hire a graphic designer to set up the foundation of all your graphics in Canva, if you're going to do it yourself, or you let someone else do it for you, because that's where visual branding and consistency comes in, and people are going to start remembering you. Something super memorable, a particular style. And I use photographs a lot, and I love to point out the photographs that you shared today really had that kind of a little bit of like faded Polaroid look to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're choosing a style, you got to keep in mind, do all these pictures, what do they have in common, you know? And graphic designers would use a color filter over them. Like Instagram used to have a color filter. They still do that anymore? You choose a color filter? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, they do. I forgot. But you got to pay attention to all of these. You know, when someone designs their own website, you can tell they didn't keep that in mind with their photographs because they're a mishmash. They don't work together.
Right.
So I'm like a huge proponent of hiring designers to do your stuff because I've seen so much amateur stuff. And people are so web savvy, they don't know it maybe consciously, but they can tell when something's off. It's like, this doesn't look right. And they're recognizing that it's amateurish and they don't understand graphic design and typography and all that stuff. So anyway, if you'd like to work with Kimmy, she is splendid. And you can check out her website. I'm going to share that here in the chat. Hold on. She had it on her, but I'll share it so that you guys can go check out her portfolio and you can save. Oops, I keep trying to save this. I can't get it. Hold on. Oops. And you can connect with Kimmy. Here it comes in the chat. There we go. There we go. braveandcodesign.com. There you go. Kimmy, I thank you so much. I love this presentation. I was like totally engrossed in it. You're talking my language. Like typography, I love it. I could go nuts with fonts all day long.
I know. Oh,
Pinterest,
me too.
forget it. Pinterest is my cup of tea. If you guys want to design your own brand, I set up a Pinterest board. I would do it just for your brand. You set up a Pinterest site. Don't put anything else in there. It's just all about your branding.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a fun thing to do. All right.
All right.
Everyone, I thank you for joining us. We'll see next week. Lisbeth is coming to talk about human design. That's going to be awesome. I did share a link on how to get your test. I got to go take my test again, or I have mine in my file somewhere. And the week after that is Mastermind Week. So you're going to bring all your questions that you may have about anything related to business or marketing. And we always have good topics come up. And then the week after that, Dana Stovern is going to do, I think she's the week after that, somatic money.